Please welcome Dan Limerick.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
Good morning to everybody. Before we get started,
Yes.
I'd just love to thank you to Hollywood Reporter and City National Bank for having me. And really, we don't get to meet a lot. Like a lot of our business managers are like we're one step removed and we don't always meet. But I know just how important you are to this process. Our clients are brands and companies, and you guys are there to keep the trains on the track. And I know how difficult it can be to do so. So really want to thank you guys, and really happy that you're being honored in this. And John, in particular, congratulations on your Icon Award. Really loved your remarks.
Hollywood is in a glum mood. Peak TV is officially over. The fallout from the strikes lingers on. Studios and streamers are laying off thousands. The market for new content is shrinking. We are sitting in a room with some of the biggest money managers in the industry. Should they have listened to their moms and gone to med school?
Oh, it's a rough time, no question, and I still think you made a good choice. So, look, this business is always changing, right? I think we always have the illusion that it was always like that there was ever a steady moment. I don't think there ever was. It's always moving. It's just not always perceptible. I think a lot of the things that we're seeing right now, as you were mentioning in the opening, is kind of a repeat of some of the things we saw before. So, like when I came into the business, it was really the height of broadcast TV. It was kind of like a locomotive. You had pilot season, it happened at a certain time, then series came on, and it was like clockwork, right? So I think we all liked it because there was a certain predictability on one hand, because you knew what would happen each year, but it was also unpredictable because it was always changing. Like there was a lot of windowing, then windowing started going away, and it was not so perceptible at the time, and then at one moment you realize, wait a minute, this whole business has changed. So I think what's interesting about that is at that time there was a lot of consolidation that happened. Independence kind of went away because I started when there were still independent companies, Carsey Werner and many others. Then they started selling to themselves. I found that the product got a little not as good, right? Because there wasn't as much diversity of programming. That gave way to actually where Netflix came in was at this point really trying to solve the problems of the industry. Lack of a place to sell the shows that we had made, not enough outlets to sell to, and as a result of that also brought more independence, and it brought a diversity of programming. Quality of programming got much better actually. So I think there's always a moment like this that also gives rise to other technologies that come in to help us out of these problems.
So you've been through a lot of booms and busts. Does this feel different than other inflection points you've experienced?
Yeah, I'd say it feels different in that we always had legacy media companies at the forefront of these conversations, and I feel like the relationship with talent was a little different, like historically. Obviously I work at WME, and we believe in talent. We believe that's the lifeblood of the industry, and what everything we do is really driven by these artistic talents. And I think there was very much an appreciation for that historically, with the studio system. I think right now it's more tech companies coming into the business, and I think there's a little bit of a shift in that regard. So I think one of the things is we have to just kind of keep the focus on the talent. I think sometimes we talk about is it distribution or is it the content of the distribution? I believe it's really about the content, personally. And I think we have to keep our eye on that. And I also believe in independence because I think we need a healthy ecosystem.
Running an agency has always involved lots of hand-holding and reassuring, and I imagine that's especially true now.
Yeah.
How hard have your clients been hit by the past few years? And are there kinds of clients that fare better than others, or is the pain kind of equally shared?
Look, I think there's, the pain's across the board, right? Because we have clients, kind of up and down the chain, So I think I think one of the challenges of the business has been the middle is a lot harder. There's a lot of focus on the top level of deals and a lot of kind of finding new people that are coming into the business. I think the middles is actually feeling it, but I think that's kind of in all businesses. But I do feel the uncertainty and the anxiety around it is certainly a challenge. Obviously, we're all adjusting to coming out of COVID and 2 strikes. We're only just starting to get our legs under ourselves again and figure out what that business looks like. And obviously, with things I'm sure we'll wind up talking about, AI and other things on the forefront are really on people's minds.
So I imagine you're thinking of things other, like with content shrinking, other ways that your clients could make money and take care of their bottom line. What are those strategies that you have, and how are you pursuing them?
Sure. I think one of the unique things about WME is we really want our clients to kind of work across all different businesses. Most of our clients are doing something in another discipline, and we're really trying to expose them. That's kind of the challenge of the agent, is to kind of expose our clients to things that might be outside of their comfort zone. So if you're an actor, are you just acting, or are you working with brands? Are you starting a production company? Or you could be working in non-scripted? Are you looking at the digital area? Are you looking at theater? We really want to expose our clients to these options, but at the end of the day, they're the architect of their own careers. They're the CEOs. So it's up to us to kind of challenge them, but it has to be really bespoke and really germane to like what they're interested in.
You guide them to say, like, here's this vodka that you could endorse.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of that. I mean, we have a talent ventures group that works with a lot of our clients, kind of up and down the chain. Obviously Ryan Reynolds with Aviation Gin, Dwayne Johnson with Terramana. I think more recently, Selena Gomez with Rare Beauty. So that's definitely something that a lot of our clients are interested in. And they have, a lot of them have a really large social media reach. And I think that's one of the differences. That's one of the things that's changing a little bit, is that you're finding that our clients it's imperative that they have a social media following and that they build it and service that audience. And I think our clients are starting to have more of a direct relationship with their audience, which is also a change, which I think is actually a welcome change, and portends some interesting opportunities for the future.
So actors can do endorsement deals or start vodka lines, musicians sell merch and go on tour. What avenues are available to, say, writers or directors or producers?
Obviously, I think the digital space is evolving, right? Like how we perceive it. I think sometimes we think in fixed terms, but like my kids, I have, a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old. They watch, they don't really watch the main TV. They're on their computer, they're watching digital, they're on YouTube all of the time, they're playing video games, they're working across a lot of different forms of media. So I think as talent, we have to kind of figure out how are we going to meet the audience where they are. The new audience that's coming up. I think right now it works one way, but tomorrow, who's to say that YouTube should be a certain type of programming? I think people are going to evolve how they program on those different outlets. The reach of YouTube is massive, and I think we're going to have to figure out ways to kind of move into these other areas, video games as well. I think you'll start seeing clients working in places you're not used to seeing them, including writers.
So you mentioned social. Is there any world in which does everyone have to have a social presence these days, or could you be a talent that just acts and doesn't post?
I think there's a place for people who don't post. It's really,
who are these people?
There's no. That's funny. There's not one size doesn't fit all, right? So I think we really want to just provide the opportunity for clients to be where they want to be. And it is our job to kind of push the clients to try to work in different areas that are maybe not so germane. But I think there's some interesting opportunities that it opens up if you're interested in doing so. And there's not a one way to do it. So I think you'll see there's quite a lot of diversity in the way that people are showing up online and the manner in which they communicate with their audience.
So we've seen the streamers in just a remarkably short time, and Silicon Valley ethos transform the way Hollywood does business. What do you think is the biggest impact of the streamers and the tech platforms that it has had on Hollywood, in good ways that were bad?
Well, I think in good ways, there's been a lot of money that's come into the system, so there's far more content than there's ever been. And even though, like, the economics, we had a pretty big boom, which I think was a bit of a bubble, like a few years ago, but where it's even settling in now is actually way ahead of where we were before they were here. So I think we sometimes aren't able to look back and have that perspective. So there's more shows. There's more ability and it's produced at a much higher level, and there's a lot more opportunities and outlets to produce for, and there's a lot more companies to work with. I think the challenge we have is that, one, we're doing fewer episodes. So that's less, less episodic fees. AI is going to be an interesting challenge that will either, on one hand, like the way we look at that is both from an offensive and a defensive perspective. Defensive in protecting our clients' likenesses and image in their work. Offensive in trying to find ways to make for more efficient production, which obviously creates better economics. And also different ways from when they do want to license their image that they have the ability to have control over that.
The AI was a huge issue in the strike, and people are fearful about AI,
Yes.
Lots of people. Do you think that fear is overblown?
I don't know that it's overblown. I think it's we should be rightfully fearful and cautious about it. At the same time, I think we should also figure out how we're going to use those tools to our advantage. I mean, all new technologies come with a reason to be cautious. And there's great reason to be in that it'll move very fast, faster than we're kind of used to with other technologies. But I also think it's going to be here. And I think that the winners will be those who are able to use these tools effectively to work alongside what we do in our creative endeavors. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. But on the other hand, I think we're going to have to, legislative-backed initiatives that seek to protect our clients' images and their rights and their works are going to be very important because this is moving quickly. It's going to be a conversation around existing contracts and how those are interpreted. And I think we need to be on the front lines of fighting those fights.
I was in the Aspen Ideas Festival with Ari Emanuel, where he said, no one should trust Sam Altman, he's a piece of shit, or something like that. So you don't agree with that?
Look, I don't. It's not for me to decide whether to trust Sam Altman. But what I would say is our role is to look ahead at where the ball is going and to try to figure out what we're going to do to protect our clients. It's the same with tech companies right now. Like we're always trying to look to how do we get the most value for our clients and what they're bringing to bear, but also how do we protect the way that their rights and images are used. It's the same thing as it relates to how it's used in streaming as it's how it's going to be used in AI. It doesn't really change. It's just for us to figure out these new technologies and to make sure that they're not working in ways we are not aware of. So like if you were to take the dispute around Scarlett Johansson, and the use of her voice. What's interesting in this is not just the straightforward example of using someone's image and trying to recreate it, but what about the scenario where you use a portion of their voice or a portion of their work and it's kind of buried inside of the system? That's actually where it gets much more complicated. So we have an arrangement with Vermilio and Loti that have been announced that really seek to kind of get at those things. It's like far more nuanced and a little wonky, but at the same time, I think that's actually some of the more concerning uses is where it's not so perceptible that they're using the work of one of our clients. And I think that's why when I speak of legislative-backed agendas, we have to figure out how to get at those things, how to have controls, and how to have third parties that can kind of audit these systems.
Well played on that Altman thing, Dan.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the buyout, the shift from buyout. Netflix obviously made a big splash when it replaced traditional buyouts with back-end model. You had Amazon, Apple following suit. We're now seeing a reversal of that trend. How do you think that's going to all end up?
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time on this, right? Obviously, the buyouts were really to get into the business and to get feature actors to start, working in the space, and as well as writers and directors. And now we're as inevitable. There's a turn. So for us, the challenge of this is really one around transparency, in that everything that's being proposed right now, and we're in a lot of conversations with all the streamers, is really looking to kind of go to some kind of metric around viewership and or engagement. And for us, that means transparency is everything, right? So one, what's the measure of success on a streamer, right? Is it the cost of it versus the viewership, which is they call efficiency? Is it customer acquisition, which is actually for them a very big metric? Is it the number of views? So one, getting to I don't know that there'll ever be a common understanding, because I think each of these are distinct businesses. Amazon is there to really program for Prime customers, as opposed to Netflix, which is really a little more traditional in that regard. So we need more information and more data, because at the end of the day, we want our clients to get paid when things are successful. And right now, it's a black box. So, there's a little more information than there has been in the past, but still not nearly enough. and all of the value of our clients' content is getting squeezed by some of these models. When you asked earlier about the difference, when we had a lot of windows, you could actually window something over time, and people are getting paid on shows that were done 30 years ago today. As you kind of are, if you're in closed systems that are exclusive, that keep the content exclusive, and it's not used downstream, when are those other residual payments, which I think we're all very familiar with in this room. So I think that's one of the challenges we want to fight. But also, it's creating other opportunities, because I think at some point Netflix probably will sell off their platform, and I do think there will be some other windows to sell into. So we want to make sure that we construct back ends that kind of account for all of it.
As you mentioned, transparency is key, and yet you're dealing with companies who've been famously not transparent and resisting transparency. Do you see that changing, and can you trust their information?
I think they're going to be pretty resistant to that change, but I think it's going to have to happen over time. One of the things we don't talk about is, like, for our clients, it's they want to know where their artistic endeavors resonate. Like, how do you know how well you're doing? Is your show best suited at Amazon or at Netflix, when you don't know how it's performing in a really specific way? So we're kind of trying to figure out where things go best. I think they're going to fight it historically, but so did HBO. When it started, they didn't give out any information initially. They also didn't sell off their platform initially. Now they give more information and they sell off their platform.
We've seen a ton of mergers in the past few years, and more consolidation seems all but certain. I know you have strong feelings about that. How has all this M&A affected the talent community?
Yeah, I think fewer buyers is not good for the business. So I think as there's a lot of consolidation initially, that's a challenge for us. So we want to see more studios. It'll be very interesting to see how the Skydance Paramount combination plays out and what that looks like on the other side.
I was going to ask you, what do you think that's going to look like on the other side? Just between us.
Yeah, just between us in this small room. I think like that's like highly speculative. I mean, there's so many ways that can go.
I think you did a little speculation.
You could,
here.
but I'd say, look, I'm really impressed with David Ellison. Like, we get to work with him a lot and his company. They've grown pretty greatly over the years. I feel like the CBS company is obviously like a very strong brand, and I do think. I do. At the end of the day, I can't really speak to them, but I guess what I would say is I could see probably, when all is said and done, 4 or 5 more, ultimately 4 or 5 big, outlets, be it Netflix, Apple, Disney, Amazon, some combination of the version of Skydance and Paramount, however that plays out, and some other combination that involves Universal, Warner, and something in between those 3 companies. I wouldn't be surprised to see something happen that's a little different where we're going. And then YouTube still kind of looms on the outside. I don't think we tend to think of them as an outlet in this way, but I don't think we're going to see them in the way we see them now.
So you came from indies. With all this consolidation happening, you see companies becoming more cautious. Even things like The Apprentice have a hard time getting made. Where does this leave smaller projects and more challenging projects? How do they get made in this environment when you have just a few dominating everything?
Yeah, I think it's challenging. It really becomes about price point as well. I think there's a price point, and then ultimately, can we produce things for a price that allows them to want to buy at that level? Maybe in some instances, we're going to have to take a little less upfront at times in order to have bigger back ends. So I think we have to figure out some like slightly different models, because I think right now there's a lot of compression that's happening on the budgets of shows, and on the budgets of our movies. So I think if we can kind of figure out ways to make things for a price, and then play for more back end and more upside, I think that's like one way we'll have to do it. And then as a result, a lot of what you talked about earlier with the back end is really we're going to put our focus, because it's really just about getting the most value for what we're doing.
Feel good about that?
I feel it's going to be a huge challenge, like where we're going. But I feel like at the end of the day, our clients, like what they put into the world wins out. And at the end of the day, other outlets will come up to solve the problems that we're dealing with now, in the same way that Netflix came up in the first place.
So we're talking about David Lawson, but speaking of David's, what's, again, between us, how do you feel about the Zaslav reign at WWD?
It's very, very different. I came from Warner Brothers, as you know. And,
So
you know,
you might have some special
yeah.
insight into David.
Yeah, look, Warner Bros. Is a very different place. So like when I came up under Peter Roth, who really taught me a lot of what I know and the way I see the business and the way I look at the world. A lot comes from working with Peter Roth for 13 years. And I was always admirable. I always admired how focused he was on the creative. And it was really always about the show. And I feel like this, when we talked earlier about the differences between now and then, I think it's people like that that were the difference. So right now we're shifting, and he has a tough job, right? It's an independent studio. It's still, at the end of the day, it's an independent studio that's trying to navigate a world that's gotten much bigger. So I think his challenges are, how do you make the world work from an economic standpoint, but then also how do you end up in a way to compete against the big companies. So I don't envy the job, but I think at the end of the day, they have a really strong library, a really strong history and brand, and I think they will endure in some way, shape, or form.
The new mantra is stay alive till 25. What's happening in 25?
That's a good question. It starts shifting to 26, though. I heard it's like, so I think the idea is like we're still coming out of what we talked about before, like still coming out of strikes and COVID, getting some normalcy. I'm excited to see that like some of the theatrical productions are starting to come in. I really believe in the health of the theatrical system. It's important for us to do that. I think one of the things we're losing in all of this is a lot of the IP that we enjoy now that's kind of coming back was created through mostly through features, some long running TV shows, and I think some of the challenges with streaming movies are kind of they come and then they go, and it's not like hitting the zeitgeist in the way that a true theatrical hit like Oppenheimer kind of creates, and it creates like much more long-term value over time. So like for us, like we obviously want to have our clients everywhere, but like we really do believe in that. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see a lot more robust marketplace in that regard.
What's the one thing you're most excited or hopeful about?
Look, to be honest, like I joined this business because I'm a lawyer, but at the end of the day, I love being around creative people. I'm not creative, but I like empowering creative people and their vision. So like what I always wanted to do was use my knowledge and business acumen to help them get where they need to go. So I'm really excited about the future because where we sit, we work with our talent, and I'm excited with the team that I work with. Some of whom are here today, Richard Weitz and Christian Muirhead, our co-chairman, and I just feel like we have a really, really strong team and I'm really hopeful about navigating the future with them.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been great.